Chapter 16. From behind him came the sound of an opening door, and Han turned his head to see Lando step into the Lady Luck's bridge. Okay, it's done, the other announced, his tone tense and decidedly grumpy. Everything's been shut down to standby. Engines, sensors, computer systems, the works. He crossed the bridge and dropped into the pilot seat beside Han. And I'd like to go on record right now as saying I hate this. I'm not exactly happy about it myself, Han had to admit, but this is the way it has to be. Lando snorted. Says a self-admitted Imperial clone TIE pilot, he added accusingly. You know, Han, I've done some crazy things in my time, but this one takes the prize. Han grimaced, gazing out at the stars. It was crazy, all right. Somewhere out there, a hyperspace microjump away, was an Imperial Ubictorate contact station, with all the security and firepower and just plain nastiness that implied. And here they were, probably well within its defensive perimeter, sitting around like a belly-up Gornt with their systems cranked way back to keep from being too visible to any auto rovers the station might have out wandering the area. Waiting for an Imperial clone to come back and tell them where in the shrunken empire the capital of Bastion was located. Leia said he was all right, he told Lando. She said he was sincere and not planning to betray you, Lando corrected darkly. She didn't say he was a competent enough liar to pull this whole thing off, especially not in front of some congenitally suspicious Ubictorate agent. Han eyed him. You don't like clones, do you? Lando snorted again. No, I don't, he said flatly. Palpatine may have talked about alien species as being subhuman, but clones are really down there. For a minute the bridge was silent. Han gazed out at the stars some more, rubbing his fingertips over his blaster grip and trying not to let Lando's nervousness get to him. Leia had agreed to let him come out here, after all, and Leia was a Jedi. Surely she'd have seen or felt or guessed if something bad was going to happen, wouldn't she? Tell me about this Baron Fell, Lando said suddenly. I mean the original one. What was he like? Han shrugged. Typical Corellian, I suppose. Well, no, actually, he wasn't. He was a farm boy, for one thing, who got bribed with an academy appointment to stop him testifying in a legal action against some big agro-combine official's son. We were at Karita together for a while, though I didn't hang around with him much. He was an honorable sort, I suppose, even a little stiff-necked about it sometimes, and a pretty fair pilot. As good as you? Lando asked. Han smiled tightly. Better, he said, a little surprised he was actually admitting that out loud. At least with something the size of a TIE fighter. So how did he wind up getting cloned? Lando asked. As I remember the history, he quit the Empire, joined Rogue Squadron, then got recaptured. So the question is, why would anyone clone a guy who'd already turned once? I don't care how good a pilot he was. Leia and I asked Karib the same question on Patrick Minor, Han said. He told us he didn't know, that it wasn't part of the flash learning they'd been giving in the cloning tanks. Lando grunted. Look, they would have had to hold him for 3 or 4 years minimum before Thrawn got his cloning tanks up and running, right? They didn't need all of him, Han murmured. Sabaoth cloned Luke from the hand he lost at Bespin, remember? Yes, but Luke's hand was one of Palpatine's trophies, Lando pointed out. Why would anyone bother keeping parts of Fel in storage? No one even knew Palpatine had all those cloning tanks hidden away, let alone that Thrawn would show up and get them running again. Point, Han conceded. So they probably kept him alive somewhere. Right, Lando said. The question is, where? I don't know, Han said. No one ever found records about him at any of the Imperial prisons or penal colonies we liberated. With his connections to Rogue Squadron, we would have heard if they had. He hesitated. The other thing you might not know is that a month or two after his recapture, his wife pulled the same sort of vanishing act. Lando frowned. I remember Wedge talking about that once, but you say vanishing. I thought it was the Empire who snatched her. That's what everyone thought at the time, Han agreed. But once I started sifting through the evidence, it was a lot less clear what had happened. Anyway, no one ever found a trace of her either. Lando shook his head. If any of this is supposed to reassure me, it's not. The only way Isard could have gotten Fell back on the Empire's side would have been to brain twist him. You want to tell me what kind of clone is going to come from that? Han sighed. I don't know. All I know is that Leia cleared him. Lando nodded. Yeah, sure. Again, silence descended on the bridge. This time it was Han who broke it. What are Lobot and Mogid doing back there? He asked. They were practicing their slicing techniques before you had me shut the computer down, Lando said, still sounding grumpy. They're probably checking over Mogid's equipment now. Did you tell them where we were going? Lando's lips compressed briefly. I told them we were going into the Empire. I didn't tell them exactly where. Or why. Maybe you'd better go do that, Han suggested. Mogid may need to brush up on Imperial computer systems or something. I don't think Verpine ever have to brush up on anything, Lando said. But he nevertheless levered himself out of his seat. Sure, why not? We might as well all be worried together. It's better than sitting around waiting for the hammer to drop, anyway. Don't worry, Han called after him as he left the bridge. It'll work out. Trust me. There was no response but the metallic thud of the door as it slid shut behind him. Sighing again, Han turned his attention back to watching for Carib's freighter to return, trying hard not to worry. The ubiquitous agent seated at his console gazed up at his visitor from under bushy eyebrows. All right, he said in a voice that somehow reminded Carib of 1,000 pressure worms scratching their wings against tall green leaves. Your ID checks out. Glad to hear it, Carib said, trying to put some righteous indignation into his tone. To his ears, though, he sounded merely plaintive. Does that mean you're finally ready to listen? The agent leaned back in his seat, regarding Carib coolly. Sure, he said. Provided you're ready to hear a list of charges against you if this big news of yours isn't as flacking urgent as you seem to think it is. He slammed his stylus down on the desk in front of him. Blast it, Devis, you know you're never supposed to come here yourself. All you people are supposed to know that. Everything you have to report goes through channels. Everything! Carib remained standing at attention, listening to the reprimand with half an ear and waiting with all the patience he could muster for the other to run out of words. The self-generated tirade, he knew, was one of the Ubictorate's classic tactics for rattling someone they wanted to be vulnerable. But no, that wasn't something he knew. It was something Baron Sunter Fell had known. Something that had been artificially transferred along with his piloting skill to Carib and his brothers. Memories that were not his own, from a person who was not him. And yet, on some level, was indeed him. It was a mind-numbing thought, a painful and depressing blurring of identity that had cost Carib many a sleepless night back on Packrick Minor, before he'd finally made the conscious decision to bury it as far back at the edge of his mind as he could. And he'd done a fair job of keeping it there, until the long-awaited, long-feared orders had come in from the remnants of the Empire. Could it really have been only 2 weeks ago? Reactivating his TIE combat unit. Then all the old uncertainties and questions and self-doubts had surged back to the front of his mind. He was a clone. A clone. A clone. Stop it, he snarled at the word. I am Carib Devist, husband of Lacey, father of Daberin and Kina, tall grain farmer of the Dorchester Valley of Patrick Minor. Where I came from and how I came to be don't matter. I am who I am. He took a careful breath, and as he did so, the doubts once again returned to their uneasy sleep in the deep crevices of his mind. He was Carib Devist, and despite what anyone else might say or believe, he was indeed a unique individual. The ubiquitous agent was starting to wind down now, and with a flicker of private amusement, Carib realized that for once the old intimidation tactic had backfired. Far from unnerving its intended victim, the tirade had instead given him the time he needed to collect his thoughts and his nerve and to prepare for verbal combat. So let's hear it, the agent snarled. Let's hear this vitally important news of yours. Yes, sir, Carib said. There was an Imperial attack on New Republic High Counselor Leia Organa Solo over Patrick Minor 5 days ago. It failed. Yes, thank you. We know that, the agent said sarcastically. Are you telling me you broke security? The reason it failed, Carib continued, was because I'm talking here, Devist, the agent snapped. You broke security for a story we could have pulled off Coruscant hourly? Was because, Carib went on doggedly, they were assisted. Will you shut up? I'll have your skin pickled in by an unknown alien ship, Carib finished. A hot, slimy. He broke off. What do you mean, an unknown alien ship? He demanded. I mean a ship with a completely unknown design, Carib said. It had 4 outboard panels like the 2 on a TIE fighter, but the rest was definitely non-Imperial. For a long moment the agent measured Carib with his eyes. I don't suppose you happened to pull any records of the battle, he said at last, his tone challenging. Not of the battle itself, Carib said, pulling a data card from his side pouch, but we did get something of the ship afterward. The agent held out his hand. Carib dropped the data card into it, mentally crossing his fingers. Solo had cobbled this thing together during the trip here from a pair of records he and Organa Solo had with him in their ship. Where they'd gotten the originals, Carib didn't know, and really didn't care either. Combat, intrigue, galactic security, none of those were matters he and his brothers wanted anything to do with anymore. All they wanted was to be left alone to raise their families and tend their farms and live their lives. And all he cared about at this immediate moment was that Solo's gimmicked record be good enough to fool this glowering bit pusher into believing it. If it was. The agent whistled under his breath, peering at his reader. Tarkin's teeth, he muttered, shaking his head. Are these energy readings correct? That's what was there, Carib hesitated, but he couldn't resist. So was it worth breaking security for? The agent looked up, but it was clear he wasn't really seeing Carib anymore. I'd say so, yes, he said absently, keying his board furiously. Sure. Just watch it when you head home, and keep with the zigzag. Dismissed. And that was it. No thank yous, no well dones, no nothing. Just a petty little ubiquitous agent on dead-end duty at the edge of nowhere with visions of promotion dancing through his head. But that was okay, Carib knew as he headed down the corridor. His part was done now, or almost done, and Solo would take it from here. He could go back to Lacey and his brothers and sink back into the quiet anonymity that was all any of them desired. Unless. He grimaced as a thought belatedly struck him. Yes, the ubiquitous agent back there had swallowed the bait in a single eager gulp, but that was no guarantee the military analysts on Bastion who would take the record apart would do the same. And it was no guarantee at all that Grand Admiral Thrawn wouldn't see instantly through the scam. If he did, and if Solo was still in Imperial space at the time. He shook his head once to clear it. No, he'd done what they wanted, and had risked his own neck to do it. What happened now was in their hands, not his. His part was done. Period. Quickening his pace, he headed towards the docking tunnel where his freighter was berthed. The faster he got out of here and back to his farm, the better. From off to the side, the speaker suddenly crackled. Solo? Hastily, Han dropped his feet off the edge of the control board where they'd been propped and keyed the comm. Yeah, I'm here, Carib, he said. You got it? Yes, Carib said. He sent the droid probe off on Vector 43 by 15. Behind Han, the bridge door opened. Is that Devist? Lando asked. Yeah, Han said as he punched up a chart. You sure this is the vector to Bastion? It's the direction the probe went, Carib said. I'm sending you a copy of the recording. What I meant was, are you sure he was sending it to Bastion? Han said, as a beep from the board acknowledged receipt of the transmission. He didn't say anything one way or the other, Carib said, but from the shining vision of promotion in his eyes, I can't see where else he would have sent it. How about to the main Ubictorate base at Yaga Minor? Lando countered. Isn't that his proper chain of command? Usually, yes, Carib said, but matters of immediate military importance go directly to the High Command. Your unknown alien ship should come under that heading. We hope, Lando muttered. Besides which, there are military politics involved, Carib added. Anyone stuck out on a contact station like this is here because the upper echelons have basically written them off. The only way to get out is to impress someone higher up in the military. Again, that means sending it straight to Bastion. Han lifted his eyebrows at Lando. Sounds reasonable to me. I suppose, Lando said suspiciously, peering with narrowed eyes at the freighter hanging in space outside the Lady Luck's viewport. So Baron Phil was pretty good with military politics, was he? Han winced. Whatever Lando's feelings about clones might be, there was no reason to go out of his way to antagonize Carib, especially when the man was trying to help them. Even more especially when they were sitting at the edge of an Imperial space within spitting distance of a Ubictorate station. Carib. It's all right, Solo, Carib said, his voice studiously neutral. Maybe you'll agree now I was right when I talked about this back on Patrick Minor. Han winced again. Carib's contention that there was still heavy prejudice against clones in the New Republic. Yeah, sorry. It's all right, Carib repeated. My part's done. I'm heading home. Good luck to you. The freighter curved away over the Lady Luck and flickered with pseudo-motion as it made the jump to light speed. He's sure in a hurry to get away, Lando growled. He's heading home, Han reminded him, turning his attention back to the chart. A course of 43 by 15 from the Ubictorate station would put it. Looks like the Suratanian system, Lando said, looking over his shoulder. Yeah, it does, Han agreed, nodding. Funny place to put an Imperial capital, Lando said, an edge of suspicion still coloring his tone. Oh, I don't know, Han said, skimming down the data the Lady Luck's computer had on the place. It was a sector capital once, so they're probably used to having bureaucracy underfoot. Still a long way from the glittering towers of Coruscant, though, Lando said. Isn't everything? Han countered. Come on, we're wasting time. Shaking his head, Lando dropped into the pilot seat. Sure. Let's just walk into the middle of the Imperial capital. Why not? Lando, look. No, it's all right, Han, Lando said with a tired sigh. I said I'd do it, and I will. I just wish I didn't have to. He reached over and keyed the nav computer. But wishes don't bring you the cards you want. Give Lobot and Mogat a call, will you, and tell them to strap in. Sure, Han said, reaching for his own restraints with one hand and going for the comm switch with the other. Hey, don't worry. It's going to work out fine. Yeah, Lando said. Sure. No! Ishori Senator Gictixano snarled, slamming a horny-tipped fist down on the table for emphasis. It is completely out of the question. The Ashori will not accept anything less than full and complete justice for the Kamasi and the people of the New Republic. Justice is what we all seek, Diamalan Senator Parolo Myatamia countered, his voice the glacial calm of his species. But, you lie, Dixano all but screamed, his ears flattened against his head. The Diamala demand the impossible and refuse to settle for anything else. Senators, please, President Ponk Gaversom cut in, his wings sweeping briefly between the other two as if trying to separate a pair of enraged shockball players. I'm not asking for a resolution of the Kamas situation here and now. All I'm asking... I know what you're asking, Tixano snarled, but justice postponed is too often justice ignored. He jabbed a finger accusingly towards Myatamia. And that is precisely the situation the Diamala are trying to engineer. The Diamala have every intention of seeing justice served, Myatamia said coldly. But we understand that more urgent matters should take priority. Thrawn is dead, Diaxano snarled, leaping to his feet as if to physically attack the other. He is dead! All Imperial records agree! Myatamia remained unmoved. I saw him, Senator. I saw him and heard him. Lies! Diaxano cut him off. All lies, created to distract us from the search for justice. Seated in the small room behind the false wall, Booster Terek shook his head. Idiots, he muttered. Both of them. Now, father, his daughter Mirix Terek Horn said, squeezing his arm. Both of them are probably sincere from their own different points of view. And we all know what road is lined with sincere people, Terek said sourly, glancing back over his shoulder. Where is that blasted Bella Bliss, anyway? I've got work to do. You've got nothing but overhaul and maintenance work on the errant venture scheduled for the next 3 weeks, Mirix admonished him firmly. And you're not needed for a single bit of it. Booster sent a glare at her, a glare that worked about as well as such looks had ever worked on her, which was to say, not very. I thought daughters were supposed to be a source of pride and comfort to their fathers in their old age, he grumbled. She smiled. When you get there, I'll see what I can do, she promised. The smile faded as she turned back to the false wall. This whole thing is starting to get out of hand. Have you heard that 100 systems have already petitioned to rejoin the Empire? My sources say it's only been 20 systems, Booster said. Everything else is just rumors. Whatever the numbers, it's still something to worry about, Mirek said, a note of quiet dread in her voice. If Thrawn is really still alive, and if all this turmoil persuades people they want to or need his protection, then the Empire could regain its territory without firing a single shot. I doubt they're going to talk that many systems into coming back, Booster argued. But he didn't feel nearly as confident as he was trying to sound. Anyway, there's not a lot we can do about it. Behind him, the door slid open. Ah, Captain Terek, General Beliblis said, striding in and offering his hand. Thank you for coming. I trust you've been well entertained? If you mean the dance show, I've seen better, Booster said, jerking a thumb towards the loud drama in the next room as he reluctantly and briefly gripped Beliblis's hand. He and Authority had never gotten along very well. Speaking of dance shows, I've got a bone to pick with you over the nonsense of the Sifkrik system 3 weeks ago. The bureaucrats there still haven't released the Hoopster's prank back to me. I didn't know that, Bella Bliss said, shutting off the speaker that was bringing the argument in from the next room and pulling over the room's remaining chair. I'll give orders to have it sprung as soon as we finish here. Booster eyed him warily. The word finish implies a start. Indeed it does, Bella Bliss agreed, positioning the chair to face the two of them and sitting down. I didn't ask you here just for a private showing of Gaversom's mediation skill. Incidentally, I presume I don't have to tell you that anything you heard here is to be considered confidential. Really? Booster frowned thoughtfully at his daughter. Let's see. The Ashori scream when they debate and want a square meter of skin off every Bothan to give to what's left of the Kamasi. The Diamala want the same square meter, but only from the Bothans who helped destroy Kamas, exhuming them if necessary, as soon as anyone figures out who they were. Who do you think we should sell these big secrets to first, Mirax? She gave her father a patient look and shifted her attention to Bella Bliss. We understand, General, she said. What is it you want? I let you see a bit of this private conversation because I thought it would help drive home the seriousness of the situation we're in, Bella Bliss said, nodding back towards the discussion still going on now inaudibly behind them. The buildup of warships over Bathawui is being repeated all over the New Republic as worlds and species line up behind the Ashori and Diamala over this issue. The only way we're going to defuse the situation is to find out who exactly the Bothans were who sabotaged the Kamas planetary shields. As a dancer general, you're no better than they are, Booster said. Get to the point. Bella Bliss locked eyes with him. I want to borrow the errant venture. Booster stared at him, too stunned even to laugh in the general's face. You must be joking, he got out at last. Certainly not. What do you need it for? Mirax asked. Bella Bliss shifted his gaze to her. We think there may be a complete copy of the Kamas document at the Ubictorate base at Yaga Minor, he told her. Gavrasom has decided to launch an information raid to try to get a hold of it. A data raid on a Ubictorate base, Booster echoed. What poor sucker pulled that assignment? Bella Bliss regarded him coolly. I did, he said. For a moment the room was silent. Booster studied Bella Bliss's face, wishing the general had glazed over the false wall behind him when he turned off the sound. The argument back there, particularly the Ashori senator's wide-armed flailing, was highly distracting, as Bella Bliss probably intended it to be. Okay, he said at last. I get the picture. You need a Star Destroyer to sneak in through their outer defenses. Last I heard, the New Republic still has some captured ones. Why not use one of those? 2 reasons, Bella Bliss said. First, they're all too well known. Disguising their markings and engine ID signatures would take too long. And probably not fool anyone for long, Mirax murmured. Booster glared at her. Whose side was she on here, anyway? Right, Bella Bliss nodded. Second, and more importantly, we can't pull any of them away from their assigned patrol duties without everyone in the sector instantly missing them. You know what an information raid is like. If the target gets even a whiff of your plans, you're sunk. Booster crossed his arms across his chest. Sorry, General. I sympathize with your problems and all, but no deal. I went through too much for that ship to risk it in some crazy scheme that's none of my business anyway. Bella Bliss cocked his head slightly to the side. You sure about it being none of your business? Booster uncrossed his arms far enough to tap at his upper chest. You see a New Republic insignia here? He asked. You see the Diamolan Senator back there? Bella Bliss countered. They're allies with the Moncals on this Bothan situation, and you know how much the Moncals hate smugglers. If all-out war breaks out, one of the first things they're likely to do is move against all smuggling groups they can find, if for no other reason than to drain the potential pool of privateers the other side can use. He lifted an eyebrow. And with an Imperial Star Destroyer in your possession, where do you think you'll end up on their list of things to do? Booster grimaced. Somewhere near the top? That's where I'd put you, Bella Bliss agreed. So helping me is very much in your own best interests. He had a case, Booster had to admit, and he could feel the accusation behind Mirax's eyes as she gazed at him, reminding him of his glib comment not 5 minutes ago about how there was nothing they could do. And it occurred to him, as it might not yet have to his daughter, that if Bella Bliss was going to Yaga Minor, Mirax's husband, Corin, and the rest of the Rogue Squadron would probably be going in with him. But to be asked to risk his beloved errant venture this way was just too much. Yes, it was falling apart, with half its systems questionable or totally dead, and with an operating cost that would make an Imperial Baron blanch. But it was his. All his. He paused. What in the worlds was he thinking of? He uncrossed his arms and resettled himself in his seat, eyeing Bella Bliss speculatively. Unfortunately, even if I said yes, you'd never get away with it, he pointed out. You turn a halfway decent sensor array on the errant venture, and a blind Wampa could tell we're not up to Imperial standards anymore. We'd need turbolaser and tractor emplacement upgrades, shield rebuilds, whole system replacements. You name it, we need it. Bella Bliss's gaze had hardened noticeably during the recitation. I see, he said dryly. Aaron Kraken warned me about you. Glad to hear he remembers me, Booster shrugged. It's up to you, General. I'll lend you the ship, but in exchange you have to upgrade the systems, and win or lose, those upgrades stay put when it's all over. The Moncals will love that. If war breaks out, the Moncals will be the least of my worries, Booster said bluntly. Every 2-bit pirate and smuggling group in the galaxy will be trying to get their hands on the venture. That's my offer. Take it or leave it. I'll take it, Bella Bliss said, standing up. Where's the ship now? Parked over in the outer mist system, Booster told him, standing up as well and trying not to show his surprise. His admittedly spotty experience with New Republic officials was that they needed more cajoling and a lot more bargaining before they finally gave in, and New Republic military officials were even worse. Where do you want it delivered? I'll tell you once we're aboard, Bella Bliss said. Booster frowned. You're coming with us? Along with 200 of my crewers, the general said. We'll assist you in flying the ship until we pick up a proper crew at the rendezvous point. I have a proper crew, Booster retorted. He should have known Bella Bliss wouldn't give in this easily. For running a mobile smuggler's depot, perhaps, Bella Bliss said. Not for impersonating an Imperial warship. I'll be bringing a full skeleton complement aboard before we leave the rendezvous point. Booster drew himself up to his full height. Let's get one thing straight right now, General, he said stiffly. The errant venture is my ship. If I don't captain her, she doesn't go anywhere. Once again, Bella Bliss surprised him. Certainly, he said calmly. I wouldn't have it any other way. I have a shuttle waiting. We'll leave at once. Whatever you say, Booster said, fighting against the bad feeling that, despite appearances, Bella Bliss had still not given in quite the way it sounded. Mirax, you might as well take my shuttle and head back home. Bella Bliss cleared his throat. What? Booster demanded suspiciously. I'm afraid Mirax will have to come with us, Bella Bliss said apologetically. It's absolutely vital that we have complete security on this, and that means no one who knows about it can be allowed to wander around loose. Booster drew himself up again. If you think I'm going to let my daughter come on a raid against a Ubictorate base... Oh no, not at all, Bella Bliss hastened to assure him. She and her son will stay behind at the rendezvous point with the prep crew. Once again, Booster had the distinct feeling of having had the blocks knocked out from under him. Fine, he muttered. Well, let's get going. If you're determined to go marching into an Imperial base, we might as well get to it. Yes, Bella Bliss said. And let me thank you once again for your help. Don't worry. It'll all work out fine. Yeah, Booster grumbled as he took Mirax's arm. Sure. That's the end of the chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.